Hello, welcome to Gigi's Galactic Kitchen. On today's menu, we're going to make a basic sourdough bread. For our bread, we need a bread flour. You want to make sure you get a bread flour specifically, a sugar, a salt, a packet of yeast. If you're feeling really ambitious, you can make your own starter, or you can buy a packet of pre-made yeast. And you need an oil. You can use a vegetable oil or an olive oil, and we'll need water. So first we're going to mix our dry ingredients. So for our dry ingredients, we are going to use 2.5 cups flour, 1 tablespoon sugar, or you can sub that with a tablespoon maple syrup if you're not doing any refined sugars. We're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon salt, and we're going to do 1 teaspoon yeast. The packets of yeast come with 2 teaspoons in them, so you're just going to use half the packet of yeast if you're doing 1 loaf of bread. If you're doing 2 loaves of bread, put the whole packet of yeast in. So first I'm going to add my flour. I usually just kind of eyeball this last bit. 2. That looks like a 1/2. The reason you want to get bread flour is because the way that it's processed, it helps the bread rise. Sugar. Salt. Now we're going to stir this all together. You just want to make sure your yeast and everything is stirred up real good, so when you add your water, your bread will evenly rise. Now that we got all of our dry ingredients mixed up, we can go ahead and set this to the side. And prep our bowl to put our bread dough in. To prep our bowl, all we need is some of our olive oil. All you need to do is pour a little of your olive oil in the bowl that your bread dough is going to go in after you mix it. You want to make sure you cover the whole bowl so that way your bread dough doesn't stick. Now you can just roll it around inside the bowl like this, or you can get one of those fancy paintbrush looking things, or you can just roll it around if you're cheap like me like this, or you can just kind of stick your hand in there and get it good. Now that we've got our dry ingredients mixed together and our other bowl prep that our dough is going to go into, we are going to add our olive oil and water to our dry ingredients. Before you do that, you want to make sure you take any of your jewels off, or you get dough stuck in them. Wouldn't want any bread dough in my crystals. We're going to add a tablespoon olive oil and a 1 1/4 cup water. You want to make sure your water is hot but not boiling. If your water is boiling, it'll kill your yeast and then your bread won't rise. So when you add your wet ingredients, you want to make a little pocket in the center of your dry. First thing I'm going to add is tablespoon olive oil. Okay. And then I'm going to add my warm water. Okay, so you want to start mixing pretty quickly. You don't want to let it sit. I start by mixing it with a spoon, and then once it starts to come together a bit, I get my hands in there, which is why I take my jewels off. So you want to wet down your hands keep a bowl of water next to you. Makes it easier. If you wet down your hands, the dough won't stick to your hands as much. Okay, now get in there and mix that shit together. See, I keep the water right here because then I can kind of just dip it in. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, I got that mixed up. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put it into my other bowl. So you wanna take your big thing of slop and slop it into your other bowl. It doesn't matter if it comes off in a couple pieces, it'll stick together while it's rising. Now that we got our bread dough in our bowl, we're going to let it rise for about 4 to 5 hours. While your bread's rising, you want to make sure that you cover it with a towel to keep the heat in. Specifically, you should use a kitty towel. You don't have to use a kitty towel. And we're back! Thanks to my time-traveling kitty Kirby, my bread rose like that. It's probably been a couple hours for you though. So I'm going to show you now how to take your bread dough and get it onto your sheet to go in the oven. There's a little bit of a technique to it, so I'm going to show you that now. So there's a bit of a technique that I use to get my dough out of the bowl and onto my cookie sheet. I use a little bit of my bread flour and put it around the edges of the bowl because the dough is wet, and if you touch it, it's just going to stick to your hand. So I start with putting around the edges of the bowl, a little on top, and then move this out of the way. Then I start working the bread dough down the sides a bit, and eventually start turning it over. And anytime I hit a wet part, I just add a little bit more flour. And the bottom is still a little wet, so I'm going to grab a little bit more flour. You want to make sure you're still using your bread flour, and eventually you'll be able to start turning it in your bowl. Alright, now this got a good coat. I'll be able to pick it up and put it onto our cookie sheet. You should be able to pick up the whole thing, put it on your cookie sheet, and I kind of spin it around a little bit, give it some shape. If you want, you can even sprinkle a little bit more flour on top to give it a little character. And there you go, ready to go in the oven. Here's our finished loaf of bread, straight out of the oven, nice and warm. Our sourdough bread recipe is part of the Back to Basics series here on Gigi's Galactic Kitchen. The Back to Basics series is based on the Platonic solids, because it doesn't get more basic than that. Sourdough bread harnesses the power of air, the octahedron. Air energy is a great reminder to stay light and versatile. Air also reminds us that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So when eating bread, remember to stay light, stay versatile, embrace change, and enjoy the simple things, like homemade sourdough bread. Enjoy!